So Martin Robinson is in Birmingham, England, and I'm in Vancouver, Canada. And we're together on this video to interact with an interview that Martin had with Maurice Glasman. And Martin, you may want to say just very briefly, you introduced him as Lord Glasman, but could you say just a brief bit more about who Maurice is for our audience?
Okay, well, he was appointed as a Labour peer to help the Labour Party with their bigger level thinking about policy, and he has an interest in something called Blue Labour, which is an attempt to redefine the Labour Party and its history as something that's distinct from Marxism. He has a particular interest in faith. He is a practicing Jew himself, but has a deep appreciation for the contribution of the Christian faith to all of this debate. And so he's become a good friend.
Great. In that interview, you introduced the notion, and my sense was he completely agreed with you, that both in the UK, Europe, here in North America, and there's lots of illustrations of this, the center isn't holding anymore. There doesn't seem to be a sense of common ground. Did you just say a little bit more about that from your own perspective, what you were hearing from him?
Well, certainly in Europe, it's the case that nationalism and the extremes are the ones that are making the pace. And one senses that there are a whole raft of fears, concerns about how individuals participate anymore in society more generally, but also in local communities. So people see their local communities changing, and the big concern probably globally is this worldwide movement of peoples. Immigration becomes a big subject and hits people at all kinds of levels, but probably the most important level is their sense of identity and belonging. So that people are deeply fearful and wanting to retreat from one another rather than finding ways of engaging with one another.
And so, and over here, similar issues. You've got in the United States threats of putting walls up to keep people out, fear of the other coming in, but also this sense, certainly across the broad middle class and the working class, of somehow not only being left out, but of the major institutions like the state, the politics, the economics, of simply leaving them out. And so that sense of not having a center anymore.
Yeah, and a feeling that somehow they're being run by elites, whether they're political elites, economic elites, that somehow decisions are being made for us that we have no way of participating in, and that seem to ignore our best interests, actually don't even care what those best interests might be. And particularly when it comes down to the micro level of family life, what's going to happen to our children, can they get on the housing market, are they going to be able to find some kind of employment, are we going to have to work till we're 80, all of those kinds of concerns, which are, at one level minor, but at another level visceral.
Yeah, I didn't hear Maurice saying this, but it seems to underlie what he's up to, which is that if we're going to rebuild the common good, it really is about what we do down at the level of the local and the everyday. It's not that the state's going to come in with an answer, or that the economics is going to come in with that, or the technological fix. It has something to do with what people do together at the local level. Was I hearing that right?
Yes, not in that interview, but elsewhere he's talked about these mediating spaces between the boundaries of the market and the state. And it's creating the spaces where people can begin to engage with one another. And he's pointing out that various institutions have been eroded. The ones that in the past would have held the centre together are weak. And he particularly, in that interview, was talking about the church, its loss of confidence, particularly its ability to speak about marriage and family, the kind of issues that we've just spoken about, have been severely weakened in a whole variety of ways. And actually, there's quite a bit of resistance sometimes from what we might call political and economic elites to even allow space for the church to act in the ways in which traditionally it has done.
So I heard him doing two things. One, exactly what you described, that the church has a massive role to play in the cultivation and rebuilding of these mediating spaces at the local. I also heard him say, I think, that from his perspective, the church had fundamentally lost confidence in itself as being a generator of a story and a narrative that mediates that space in the middle. Was I hearing that right?
Yes, that is exactly what he's saying. And what he probably might not be quite as aware of is that in many ways and in many places, interestingly, the church, certainly in the United Kingdom, or at least in England, I would say, as opposed to the UK as a whole, is strangely beginning to recover a sense of confidence and local life. And one sees many evidences of growth, renewal, community life within the life of the church, so that we're almost at reaching a place where the church is able to rediscover a kind of vitality about its own life. But interestingly, even if we grow enormously, which hasn't happened yet, but it could happen, even if we grew enormously, there's a danger that we might still be completely irrelevant. In fact, we might even, without meaning to, contribute to the sense of fracturing because we've just become another interest group, possibly a healthy interest group, but one that still hasn't acquired the vocabulary, the language, the ways of speaking from a narrative point of view about how we enter into this public space. So we're weak on arguably discipleship at the micro level, but at the macro level, we're very weak in knowing how to change the conversation or engage in a conversation with these areas of public space.
It's certainly a huge concern of mine. I think that in Canada and the United States that I know extremely well, there are definitely, like you're saying, pockets where churches are understanding what Maurice is describing of this invitation to be the people of God in local communities. But to a very large extent, what saddens me, to be honest, is that the local and that sense of being in place is becoming, again, just another tactic for fixing the church inside itself. And I think that's partly what Maurice was pressing into, is how do we cultivate the kind of spaces where the church's own identity as being that which lives for and with and dwells among the people in the local is rediscovered. I think his points there were very, very important.
And I think he's hinting at that because on the one hand, he's commending the church for their grasp of the importance of place and the importance of remaining. And actually, I had been speaking with him earlier about one particular story, a story of 5 generations of a family that were committed to their local church and committed to remaining.
Yes.
So he sees all of that. But within that, as you rightly say, that's not just a tactic for making the church grow. There needs to come a sense of generosity, of accommodating others in ways that allow us to, if you like, practice hospitality of an outrageous kind that isn't, in the first instance, looking after our own interests.
Exactly. Yeah.
But actually saying, look, we actually welcome the contribution of others, and we have the strength and confidence to do that precisely because of the story that we are inhabiting. So we're not just remaining, staying in place, faithful presence, but we're also saying, well, actually, we'd like to find ways of connecting with our community in new, refreshing, creative ways, such that a whole horizon of new possibilities and new imagination, if you like, about what this place could become, that isn't then dominated by the market and the state, but begins to find a new kind of story.
Yeah, that's the wonderful gift, I think, that both lies before us and is beginning to emerge. That I'd share your observation that you keep meeting Christians who want to dwell in the place where they live and ask that question, how do we be a part of and contribute to its thriving? And I'm watching a turning away from, church as affinity group that I drive to people hungering for church to be that which begins to take shape in the community and the neighborhood in which I live. And I think, Maurice is onto some pretty important stuff here.
Well, he's a friend and an ally.
Yeah.
We need more such friends and allies to help us in this process, because this is new territory. We don't necessarily have the answers.
Right.
But at least we have an ambition.
Well, Martin, thank you. It's been a great conversation. And I hope people turn to that video and watch it many, many times, as I have. It's very rich.
I do apologize for the James Bond theme, but there we are. It's part of the consumer culture in which we live.
Well, it is English. God bless.